Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you at the end of week 6 of the 2025 NFL season. And what a week it was! Plenty of headlines, and as a result, plenty for us to talk about on this show. And we will be getting into that very shortly. But before we do, we need to do the admin for the show, which is as simple as always. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you are new, then you can don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube platforms where you're listening to this. And don't forget to leave a comment as well and hit the bell icon. You know, all those things that everyone says whenever they want to plug the YouTube channel. It really does help us a lot. And also comments really does help drive the debate as well. So if you're new, don't forget to do that. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you so much for your continued support and your continued listenership in this endeavor. Don't forget to follow us on our social medias as well. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and we are on Twitter at MRB Sports Media. So feel free to join us over there as well. Right, let's get into it. And there's only really one place for us to start, and that is in Tennessee, where the Tennessee Titans have fired head coach Brian Callahan. He departs with an overall coach record of 4-19. Obviously, last year 3-14 got them the number one pick, got them Cam Ward. There was hope that he may be able to, start turning this around. He had a very good track record. Obviously, he was the Bengals offensive coordinator with Joe Burrow, so maybe he'd be able to, work his magic there and turn Cam Ward into a superstar. And he just wasn't given the chance to do so. Now, on the surface, I do think this was very, very harsh from the Tennessee Titans. Again, you can give him one season. I always think one season, not necessarily saying it should be totally expunged, but unless you are having a total disaster, like you are going winless, then I think you should be given that first season. But 3-14, okay. Struggles, still adapting to head coach, having to work on both sides of the ball, and you get the number one pick. So you get a quarterback, your side of the ball. Let's give this a chance, okay? So first season, okay. But then going into the second season, I just think they've jumped the gun on this slightly too early. I think, yes, it's a bit of a bad start to the season, 1-5. The offense hasn't exactly been lighting it up. Let's see, go through their results. They've scored 12 points, 19 points, 20 points, 0. 22 points in that only win against the Cardinals, and then 10 points this past weekend. But again, I do think also there is the element of you at least let it play out that little bit more when you have a rookie quarterback. This was meant to be a long-term thing for the Tennessee Titans. There was a lot of pressure put on Cam Ward. But at the end of the day, he is still trying to pick up a very low team and trying to get them moving up gradually. Now, not everyone is going to be able to, hit the ground running and turn into a CJ Stroud or a Jaden Daniels. There are some quarterbacks that do take time. We discussed last week, Baker Mayfield with the Cleveland Browns, a very bad organization. Yes, he won his first game, but they weren't exactly competitive directly, and right away. They did still have a bit of a tumultuous start to life, and then they got better. So to bail on him this early, I just don't see it. Now, what it does mean for the Titans is they are going to be looking for a new head coach, and I do think that an offensive mind is still the way to go about it. You don't want to have a defensive-minded head coach because we know that this is occasionally what general managers and owners will do. If something is going wrong, then they will, flip it back the other way. If it's a culture change, if someone's too much of a quote unquote nerd, shall we say? Not that I'm saying that in a bad way, but these are the labels that get passed around, like a Mike McDaniel. If that's not quite working, then maybe you go the other direction. Or if you have an offensive mind and things don't work out, okay, then we'll go for a defensive mind because he'll be able to sort out the defensive one. So I don't think it's quite right for them to just completely go the other way and go for a defensive-minded head coach. I do think an offensive-minded guy would be the best suited for them. If I were to pick a name off the top of my head, I would go for Bobby Slowick. You saw what he was able to do in Houston with CJ Stroud as a rookie, And, he's the senior passing game coordinator or advisor or whatever title it is in Miami with the Dolphins. And, things aren't quite working out there as we will get into, but I don't think it's his fault. Again, for reasons we'll get into. But that was all the talk after his work with CJ Stroud was, oh, this guy could be the next offensive guru. He could be a great head coach. I'd be quite tempted to give him a call. Plus, if you're in the AFC South, taking someone that was formerly of the Houston Texans might be able to give you that slight advantage over the Texans, and maybe in that division, which is a very open division, it must be said, might just be what they're looking for. Now, do they go and approach mid-season? I don't know. I mean, the Dolphins aren't exactly lighting anything up, so I don't think they're gonna, complain. Oh, you're taking someone away during a playoff race or a playoff hunt. For instance, maybe you might be able to get away with that, but if it's not now, I think that would be a mind to keep an eye on for later in the season. So that is where I think the Titans are going to go or should go at least. But I do feel bad for Cam Ward in the sense because again, I think you look at. I believe this is the point I made. For Baker Mayfield was the main one. Is you need to have some level of consistency at least, or try to be consistent to start with, because you saw what happened with Baker Mayfield was every year he started off with either a different head coach or a different offensive coordinator. And whilst he did okay with the Browns, there was always going to hold him back. Could he really achieve his true potential with the Browns? Then you saw that maybe they thought, oh well, this isn't quite going the way we wanted, so we'll get rid of you. Would he have been able to put up better numbers if he'd had some more consistency in his life, whether that be offensive coordinator or head coach? So for Cam Ward to be done like this, look at Mac Jones with the Patriots. He had to change offensive coordinators a couple of times, and then there was one time he had Matt Patricia, the defensive-minded guy, as his offensive play caller. So that was never going to work out for him. So at any level, you need to have some level of consistency, and maybe things would have turned around. We're seeing with the Chicago Bears. Just a hint on what we're going to be talking about later. The Chicago Bears finally, after a couple of weeks, Caleb Williams looks like he may be on the same page as Ben Johnson. It just takes time. So for them to bail on Brian Callahan this early, I'm not too sure. And again, the effect it's going to have on Cam Ward and the start of his NFL career, I'm just not too sure if this is the right way for him to go. Right, moving on to the second off pitch. Well, I suppose it's off pitch. It's on pitch in a way. But it's something that's been discussed a lot in the media, and I just want to give my take on it. Especially, well, it happened last night. It's happened a couple of times this season, and I think we're scheduled to have another one of it this year. But it's the Monday Night Football doubleheader, and I'm okay with doubleheaders on Monday night, but I'm not a fan of the concurrent doubleheaders where you have two games going on at the same time. Whilst I get that it is somewhat similar to Sunday, where, one game ends and then you can get to the last, if there's any time left to play, you can go and watch the ending of the other one. But on Monday night, I just think like that's something that prime time should be kept to itself. Go back in the day, Monday Night Football was the game of the week before Sunday Night Football became the main one, and I just think that institution needs to be protected, as it were. So, again, a lot of people have talked about it. I know we have a doubleheader coming up where I think one of the games, the Seattle Seahawks are playing someone, and it kicks off at 10 o'clock Eastern, which is fine. The first game will kick off at 7, so there may be some overlap, but it'll only be, into the first, 5-10 minutes of the first quarter, and then you can tune over, assuming you're not tired and wanting to go to bed. But to have two games on at the same time on Monday night, unless you are going to make it special and maybe have it at the same time and simulcast and have a broadcast. But this is for the main audience, not on some app like ESPN Plus or Hulu or wherever it is that Disney, ABC, ESPN own. But if you're going to have like two boxes, side by side, maybe do it towards the end of the season where you can have two divisional games. The AFC South, the Jaguars and the Texans on one screen, the Titans and the Colts on the other, because you think it may, impact the standings and who's going to go where in the playoffs. Fine. In that sense, if you want to make a special Monday night out of it, go for it. But two games opposite like that, to then have to be able to flick back and forth between the two. If you want to keep watching, I just don't get it. Yeah, it works on a Sunday because there are so many games, and that's the only time that you can fit you can fit it in, and that's when I think YouTube TV and Direct TV or Sunday Ticket have you can have as many games as you want on your channel, as the Jason Kelsey adverts, which have become annoying, have started to tell me, or have been telling us rather. But I just feel on a Monday night in prime time, it should just be one game. But if you are going to do two games, give us the option to have us, have them side by side so we can keep track and maybe flick either side so we can have the audio. But just as a whole, I don't agree with the concept of Monday night back. But back to back games are fine, but to have them going on at the same time, I'm just not really a fan of it. I know some people have talked about the reason is that ESPN and the NFL can use it as a way to boost ratings and say X amount of people watch Monday Night Football and fugazi the numbers in a way. But just for the enjoyment of the fans, I don't think no one likes it. You look on social media, have you seen any positive comments to say I really like Monday Night Football, two games on at the same time? You don't. So let's just get rid of it, scrap it. No one likes it. End the experiment after this. End the experiment after this season, and maybe try something. Maybe try something else. But I just don't think this method is going to be long standing in the NFL. And with that, we move on to our wraparound segment where I normally talk about the results, but I think there are just a couple of storylines coming out of the games where the results are not necessarily going to matter. But I think there are a couple of topics that need to be dived in. So this one won't be the quick wraparound that you used to. But anyway, let's dive into it. The first one, let's go with Myles Garrett's comments after the Cleveland Browns lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he was asked a couple of comments in the press conference afterwards. One of them to the effect of, what's it like seeing another team play with the lead, and the fact that you can see other edge rushers being given the freedom to go get after the quarterback. Because obviously, if you're the team that's winning, the team that's trailing is more like going to throw the ball. So you as an edge rusher are going to have more chances to go to the quarterback. And he was effectively saying, it must be nice. They're basically showing the shows of basically hinting that he's jealous of the Pittsburgh Steelers and other teams as a result for being able to be put in that position. Now, my thoughts on this are pretty simple. Myles Garrett had the chance. He said that he wanted to be in that position, and he made his position very clear because he demanded that trade in the summer. He said, I want to win. I want to win Super Bowls. I love the Browns, but I want to win a Super Bowl. So I'm requesting a trade." He made that very clear, putting out the statement on social media. But then the Browns gave him that mega contract, and he backed down. So what do you really want? Do you want money, or do you want to be able to be put in a position where you're winning games, possibly winning Super Bowls, and being on a team where you get that chance to pad your stats in a way by playing on teams that win and be able to get those extra sacks and play with that freedom? So I don't think he really has any right to complain in this situation because again, he had that chance. Now, whether or not someone would have come and got him. He's a star player, he's a brilliant player. If someone maybe didn't have the draft capital, well, we say that, but the Green Bay Packers certainly did because they went and got Micah Parsons. And what would Myles Garrett be doing on the Green Bay Packers right now? A damn side of a lot more than he's doing on the Cleveland Browns, it must be said. So he could have stayed true, held firm on his belief that he wanted to be out of Cleveland, but he decided to take the money instead. So I don't want to hear any words from Myles Garrett about complaining about the situation that he's in because he put himself in this situation, plain and simple. So, yeah, none of that from Myles Garrett. Maybe he'll be able to revisit this in the upcoming off season. Maybe someone will make a trade for him and make him happy. But until then, he gets no sympathy from me. Moving on, the next topic, the Kansas City Chiefs and their win over the Detroit Lions. And again, this isn't necessarily about the result. I do think it's good. I do think the Chiefs are, quote unquote, on their way back, if you want to put it that way, with a very good result against the Detroit Lions. And they are only going to get better because Rashee Rice is on his way back after his suspension. But this doesn't concern either team. Well, this concerns the referees. And I do think the NFL does need to do something. I'm not saying forcefully. But when the Kansas City Chiefs have a game where they don't have any penalties, they are not going to help the conspiracy theories. And I'm sure that people within the NFL and the NFL officiating world, they must know the stories. There's no way that they live in such a bubble that they don't hear all the jokes on social media that the Chiefs always have a 12th man on the field and all the memes along those lines. There is no way they can't hear it. So do you not think that in a referee's mind now, again, I'm not saying create flags out of nowhere, don't create false penalties, but are we really meant to believe that the Kansas City Chiefs are that buttoned up that in today's day and age where flags are being handed out very, very liberally, that they didn't commit a single penalty? We even saw a couple of examples. I think Chris Jones was lined up or offside or someone false started. There was one that you could definitely see, but it wasn't called. Again, you're not going to get away from the allegations that there is corruption going on if you have games like that. So again, I'm not saying just throw the flags willy nilly, but with the Chiefs, with the officials, they just need to be that extra bit more vigilant for things because even if they'd have got one penalty, at least that would have been something. But to have a whole game with zero in today's day and age, it's hard to think that any team is really that buttoned up to be able to do it. So again, referees just need to be extra sure that they are 100% correct with their calls when it comes to Kansas City Chiefs. Because if they have another game like this, the conspiracy theories are only going to get louder, and that's not going to help the NFL in the long run. And when it comes to Super Bowl, people will still watch, but there will be some people who will not watch because they will think, oh, it is rigged in favor of the Chiefs. So just extra caution needs to be exercised there. Moving on, and arguably onto the biggest one of the weekend, and that's the comments from Tua Tagovailoa concerning the Miami Dolphins and the lack of leadership that is clearly on show within that organization. I've made comments before about how Mike McDaniel and maybe Tua Tagovailoa are not going to last the season, but comments like the ones that he made and admissions are really not going to help anybody's cause in all of this. Him saying that players are turning up late for players only meetings now raises flags on two levels. Not only are there players only meetings, which we know is always a bad sign that things are not going well within the camp, but the fact that players are then not turning up or turning up late for them shows bad leadership within the quarterback group. Because who is the leader of the team? It is more often than not, barring a rookie or whatever, it is always going to be a quarterback, and especially a veteran quarterback like Tua, the face of the franchise. So if that is happening, then that shows he's not a leader, and it shows that Mike McDaniels is not a leader. So something drastic needs to change within the Dolphins. Yeah, this is as a whole organization. Because again, this is a team that on paper could go up against anyone in the league. I've been spouting about them for the past couple of years. If things go right, if schedules work out, because we know what they're like when it gets to minus 40 degrees, or not minus 40 degrees, 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, they tend to wane away. But if the schedule lines up right, they could easily win a division, maybe even get number one seed. They have the talent to do that. But just the utter dysfunction within the organization, this team's only going one way, and it certainly is not up. Moving on, and we head back to last Thursday night, where the New York Giants. I'm not stunned in my notes. I don't know if that's going a little bit too far with it, but certainly I think in many people's eyes, I've certainly upset the Philadelphia Eagles. And honestly, I think the main takeaway from this, which I think the one that most people are taking away from it, is the New York Giants may just have a quarterback on their hands. I think they handled it the right way. Don't some quarterbacks are okay to be thrown in right away, depending on the situation. Some may need a couple of weeks to develop. Some may need to sit for a season. Some may need to sit for a couple of seasons. But I think the New York Giants handled this perfectly. Start a veteran like Russell Wilson. Then, if things go wrong or if he got injured, then you slowly bring Jaxson Dart into it. And I think the past, the start to his life as a New York Giant. Again, I don't want to get ahead of anything, but there is enough promise there for you to think, okay, this kid could be something. Now I know that we've had that a couple of times. My thought right off the top of my head is Will Levis. Remember what happened when he was with the Tennessee Titans? The fact that he had such a big arm and was making great throws. Everyone thought, oh, this guy's going to be the quarterback. And then it sort of tailed off a bit. So I'm not going to say instantly they have their franchise quarterback, but there is enough here to make you think that something is possible out of it. And I spoke about how Brian Daboll, needed to have a good season in order to keep his job. Again, they may not end up with a winning record, but if Jaxson Dart keeps playing the way he does, and Cam Scadaboo as well, I don't want to take anything away from Cam Scadaboo. What a brilliant running back he is, both as a player and as an aura, as it were, because of everything that's been talked about around him in the meme game and everything. But that backfield has the potential to, again, show them something for the future and maybe keep Brian Daboll in his job where if they'd have lost or had a losing season, maybe he would have gone. But now you think, okay, a losing season, but with good performances from Jaxson Dart and Cam Scadaboo. Okay, we may have our backfield. We'll give Brian Daboll another year. So I think excellent for Jaxson Dart there, and as a result, Brian Daboll as well. And finally, sticking on quarterbacks that are on the move, I do want to say, no, I hinted at it earlier, Caleb Williams with the Chicago Bears. I think, there was all the talk in the offseason about how he was struggling with Ben Johnson's system. And, I said that this may be the season that they bail on Caleb Williams because you look at the structure of things. Okay, the quarterback comes in. Does he do well? Okay, change the offensive coordinator or head coach. Then, if things are working out, then the quarterback goes and the head coach stays. There's usually the order. That's usually the order in which things go. So Caleb Williams could very well have been moved on at the end of the season, but again, a couple of weeks now, he started to play that little bit better. Just he gets gets used to Ben Johnson's system that little bit more. So again, maybe he's just about not saying this could always go south. But right now, if he plays the way he is, then he is going to keep on. He's going to be able to keep his job for that just a little bit longer and be given that chance to grow with Ben Johnson as the head coach. And for the final story, where we move away from the NFL and talk about a different sport, and this one concerns soccer, concerns football, and concerns the World Cup, where I think we need to take a moment to give a shout out of congratulations to the Cape Verde football team, who have qualified for the World Cup, but they are the second smallest country that have ever qualified. Now, I know some of it is tempered by the fact that this is a 48-team World Cup, so all these smaller nations had the chance. There was always going to be some of them to come out to qualify, but Iceland making it in 2018 with a population of at the time just over 350,000. Now Cape Verde doing it with just shy of 525,000. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. Again, I urge everyone whenever I talk about these things, go and watch the clips of the team qualifying and celebrating doing it. And that is what the World Cup really is all about. Moments like that, you can make the comparison to things like March Madness, when a very small team makes its way through, just how much it means for for these players, for the country to be able to play on the biggest stage. Now, there is a decent chance whenever the groups come out, there is a good chance they will lose every single game, and there is a good chance that they will lose all those games heavily. But I still think it is a moment to celebrate for Cape Verde, very small nation, to be able to compete on the biggest stage. And I think that's going to be absolutely brilliant for them, and it is a remarkable achievement. But that is it for this episode. I want to, as always, thank you very much for listening and staying with us. As I said at the top of the show, if you are new, then don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and hit the bell and leave comments. Everything that you need to do. And if you are a returning listener, then do the same. Do the same as if you are a new listener. You don't know this isn't exclusively for them. But yeah, do everything you need to do, and don't forget to check us out on our other social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and on Twitter we are at MRB Sports Media. So feel free to check us out there. I should be back next week, where again, hopefully there will be plenty more to talk about and plenty more to dive into. So until next time, take care, and as always, stay safe.